Welcome back to the Sweet Spot, where IT leaders share the insight with all leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, my two co-hosts, Holton and Paul Lewis. Take two.
Hey now.
Because otherwise I was gonna. So 100 episodes, Carlos has nailed the intro every time until today. Till today. Right. And unlike Paul and I, who don't get to cut and reshoot when we make a mistake, Carlos has the controls, so he just cut and reshot.
Right. We were 15 minutes in and he cut the whole thing off.
It was terrible. It was terrible. So
nice.
So Paul, the last couple weeks, Carlos and I have been working our tails off. Carlos working for you to make you look good, and you've been mucking about in Greece. Like, what's going on?
That's right.
Cruise.
I've traveled the world. I had a trip, not a vacation. I was able to visit several countries. Started in Venice, walked around the canals, appreciated that history. Went to Croatia, a couple stops, saw things like where the mother of dragons kept her dragons. That was fun. In Split, Croatia. I then went to a couple islands in Greece, went to Ephesus in Turkey, and then ended up in Athens again so I could look at the Acropolis, which was amazing. I visited a half a dozen Acropolises. I've probably spent, 80 hours in both lecture-based content and historical site content, and it was awesome and amazing, and I'm tired and I'm glad to be back. But it was a trip not to be forgotten, that's for sure.
So it was a trip because it involved work rather than a vacation, which not a trip because you were on acid the whole time.
It did not involve work at all. But the difference between work and vacation is a vacation you go and stare at the wall, have beverages by the sea and do nothing. This was up at 6 a.m., learn, have a nice dinner, do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it had some sort of scheduled effort that was required. That's what I mean by work, not the thing to which you are paid.
Correct. Yes, it was a lot of being in places at the right time in order to get on the bus to go to the other place. Definitely a lot of schedule, but I kind of like that, right? As a Disney file, you kind of have to, work in the schedule of both the park and the rides, so the same kind of thing. It would not be in my personal best interest to sit by a pool or a beach and stare at the water for 12 hours. That would last about 45 minutes.
Yeah, okay, so I don't feel bad because I can't do that either.
I could do 45 minutes. That's the longest I could do, 45 minutes.
That's right. I would then stand up and have to walk and do something.
I mean, I would be fine sitting there for 12 hours, but I'd be reading a book.
Right.
Like I could easily sit and read for 12 hours solid without much of a break. Like if my wife didn't say, "Hey, stupid, you haven't eaten anything," I could probably easily sit there for 12 hours.
All right. So you could vacation. Could you do that 12 days in a row?
No.
No.
I could do it 12 hours in a row. Didn't you hear me? I just said 12 hours.
Right.
One requires effort, the other one requires work.
Right.
So did you enjoy it? Were you happy?
It was amazing. It was purposely created that way. I learned much more than I had going in. So as an example, I presumed an Acropolis was a fort in some way. It was where, the armies of the particular region was preparing for battle and, fighting off the forces that were coming at them, when in fact, and there was only one of them, right? The Acropolis of Athens. In fact, there are many Acropolises. In fact, there are generally an Acropolis per town. The closest mountain or hill to that particular area, and it was just in many ways a safe haven, right? There's marauders constantly coming in, and I'm just a town with a bunch of shoemakers, and I need to get someplace so I'm not marauded. Right? And I got to see lots of those because that's where lots of history is. That's where a lot of the towns were found, right? A lot of the finds, archaeological finds. Good. Enjoyed it.
So now in in Western Europe, you're going to find castles came out of forts, which were really the first things that were built once someone established enough control over a region to build any lasting construction, right? Because they were invading someone else's land. Is the same true of the Acropolis? Like, was that generally like the initial kind of fort that established the edge of the nation that they then built the city out from, or was the Acropolis, like, did the Acropolis come by later as Greece was already established and there were other invaders that were kind of pressing in on Greece?
Parcel. What you wouldn't find is an Acropolis that's sitting up against the water, right? It isn't supposed to be fortification against, anybody coming at you. It was set way back generally because, if you saw somebody coming and you were the fisherman in this town, you wanted to be able to get to a place that was safe inland, which would have taken longer for anybody that had an armada of boats coming after your particular island, which is, very relevant in Greece, where there's, depending on how you count, either 2,000 or 8,000 islands.
Right. So that's interesting. So they would set the Acropolis on a hill back far enough that whatever marauders they were used to dealing with at the time didn't have anything that they could range that far, and thus had to make landfall.
Correct. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Exactly. It wasn't a fort in the sense where it's right on the water, right on the hill. It was the one shooting ships. No, that's not what they were for.
Sure, which meant they effectively abandoned the city.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Let the marauders do the pillaging. We're going to stop the raping.
Right. Exactly.
Right. I mean,
you want to narrow it down to a.
I mean, but that's effectively what they did, right? Leave because you're not dragging your possessions to the Acropolis.
Right.
Right. So I think that's interesting, and I'm going to Carlos for a second because that speaks to a nation that was really focused on the things that were important. Right. Happiness is people. Happiness is not possessions.
Right.
Right.
And I think they got used to a lot of new ownership. Right. Everywhere you go, here was the era of the Ottomans.
Sure.
Sometime later, here was the era of the Romans. Sometime later, here's the era of the Greeks. Oh, after that, here's the era of the Romans again. Right. It was just a lot of changing hands, and you can tell that in the architecture. Like, there's always 4 or 5 levels of a homestead, and you could tell when that particular homestead was built and who was living in it just based on the stones that were used.
Sure. Well, not just the stones, right, but the method used to do the stone carving.
Right.
Right. How was it placed? How smooth are the stones? Like the not just the artistry, but the engineering of that particular time was evident. I saw the same thing in Jerusalem, and I found it like I could have spent the entire day walking around the walled city, admiring the change over time, because you saw 1,000 years of conquest, 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years of conquest contained within those walls, and it was really, really impressive to look at and impressive to see. And you could not only could you see everyone who left their mark, but you could almost track it to advances in war. Right? Advances in war are almost universally, I need to build a bigger wall for the thing that's happening, until walls are no longer necessary.
Right.
Right. In modern warfare, walls are they serve no useful value. Right. There's no wall we cannot accurately fire over, and so the walled city serves no reasonable purpose. Matter of fact, in modern warfare, the wall probably hurts you significantly more than it helps you nowadays, because there is advantage to being able to disperse your people and not keep them all within, that space. When it comes to biological warfare, when it comes to explosive warfare, when it comes to nuclear warfare, there is a lot of value to dispersing your people.
Yeah, one smart bomb would not be in your best interest.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Ephesus was interesting in that originally it was built on the water, but then over time, as the town grew, they've effectively wasted and created so much waste that all of that river sort of became mud. And the town actually became miles away from the actual water. And they had to rebuild Ephesus closer. So they had to keep rebuilding it because they laid waste to the water that's actually coming at them.
Right. And did they redirect the flow of the river around the waste, or did that happen naturally? Like,
nope, they just rebuilt the town closer every time.
Oh, that's bizarre. That seems like a really silly way to do that. Right. Like,
right. But remember, this is over thousands of years, right? It wasn't, every decade they rebuilt the town.
No, but like somebody should have been able to have a measuring tape of some sort and gone, you know what, this used to be beachfront property, and then that was beachfront property, and then that was beachfront property, and then that, like, guys, maybe we should have a planning committee.
Right.
Like maybe we need a little bit of city planning, some civil engineering, something to say, hey, I think maybe how about we redirect the flow of this river like a half a mile away, and we establish some rules, so this will be the last time we move the city, not just the next time we move the city.
Yeah. And some of that I think is just different ownership, right? Different ownership, different conquering, different thought on how I need to implement that engineering.
Sure. I mean, I guess if it changes hands every 10 years too, it's kind of hard to really give a hell, because ultimately I can't make any progress in 10 years or 20 years, in ancient times. I need 100. And if I don't really care what happens in 100 years, because like my dynasty's not even going to own it, then I guess maybe it's not worth the investment, and I just let it happen.
So
that's the amazing part of that. Sorry, go ahead, Carlos.
My mom was a history teacher, and she said that we need to learn from our previous mistakes or what we have done. So you look happy. You look like you enjoyed that trip. And people at that time, and I think that Howard was hitting at something. Sometimes when people like start building or start changing and they don't plan, they don't look at the effect. Do you guys see any parallel in that into some of the work that we do? Like when you're leading a team or leading something, and then all of a sudden, well, I'm not going to lead that for a long time. I don't care too much. Or the ones that actually focus on, no, this need to change because I am not going to lead for a long time, or I'm not going to be on that role for a long time.
I mean, there's very little where the purpose is the thing itself, or should be the thing itself, right? Technology for technology's sake is a terrible way to create technology. In the same way that leadership for leadership's sake is not a good way to create leadership, right? There has to be a purpose, there has to be a goal, there has to be a point. And while we can easily say perfection is not attainable, right? At what point do you have enough growth? At what point have you made enough progress? At what point is it time to move on, move up, or move out, right?
Do you not measure success for a technology leadership in both short-term, medium, and long-term, though? Like some decisions I'm going to make are for today. Some of them are going to make it for the year. Some of them may outlast my tenure in this organization.
Sure, but isn't there a limited, like, if I started an organization that is in chaos as a service, right, and I turn it into a well-oiled machine, is it reasonable to expect that I'm going to get the same level of satisfaction on both sides of that equation, right? Like maybe I don't like, maybe I do much better in chaos. Maybe I do much better in order, right? But at one side of that equation or the other, like I'm likely to go, well, the thing that I came here to do is done. I didn't actually come here to, to do whatever state it's at now, right? And so yes, I put the wheels in motion, but do I really need to be the one to see it through to completion? Let's be honest. If any of us put a 30-year plan into motion, we're not going to see it through to completion.
That's true.
Yeah, we probably should be putting a 30-year plan into motion. Like we should be thinking that long. We should be thinking out that long. And if it's not 30 years, then what is the limit? Is it 20? Is it 15? Is it 10? It's probably reasonable. 10 might be reasonable. 5 sure should be reasonable, right? But I would argue that we really should be planning for the next generation, whatever that generation looks like.
I think it's fair to say that programmatically, I've never thought much beyond 3 to 5 years. Like whatever programmatic technology implementation, create a new PMO, do an enterprise architecture practice, build some software, that I don't have this general plan that's a 10-year adventure, and it's to be much more amazing years from now than it currently is. Put that energy into people and say, I think this person will in the next 10 to 20 years, and therefore I'm going to put some energy into that person. Do I believe that person might eventually be a CIO? I don't really know. And if I'm not working with them after the fact, I don't actually, I'm not encouraging them anymore, and therefore I don't know if they're getting the experience and expertise they require to do so. But that's the only time I really look beyond 3 to 5 years. Did you look differently when you were operating as a CIO? Did you actually really look at a 20-year adventure for any decisions you were making?
10 years for sure. I don't know that 20 years would have been reasonable, right?
What's a 10-year outlook you would have made?
Transformation from startup to enterprise. There are definitely decisions that take far longer than 5 years to really see the outcome, right? And things that you're not ready for that you need to stage, right?
Is that transformation?
The question is, did you think you were going to be there in 10 years? Like, did you think you were going to see the resolution?
No, not ever. I've never gone into an organization with a plan to leave, right? But 10 years always seemed like a long time. And I've been in organizations for 10 years, but it always seemed like a long time, 5 is really, like, let's say 3 to 6 is really where I'm smartest. Like, it's what works best for me. I can escape some of the traps of things I don't like to do. I can get away from the boredom that drives me completely nuts. But that still doesn't mean that I shouldn't plan for what I put in place to have pieces that'll run beyond my tenure. Sorry, I'm not.
I see it more wind up. I see it more as a wind duck toy process, whereas my job was to wind up 3, 4, 5, 6 ducks, drop them on the ground, and let them go. I don't know where they're going to end up necessarily, but I've set them in the right direction, and I knew it needed to be a duck, and I knew how much I need to wind it for it to get to some reasonable distance. But I didn't really know where it was going to land and whether they crossed paths or whether it actually doubled back and came back to me. Does that seem odd?
No. I'm not sure it's that different, but it's a fleet of ducks rather than one duck.
Right. Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna set 12 ducks in motion, or I'm gonna build 12 little sailboats and set them out on the lake all at the same time. And sure, I can't guarantee that they're going to end up at the destination, right? But because once they go over the horizon, I'm not watching them anymore. I'm trusting that what I've done to get them to the correct point in the horizon is gonna continue taking them forward the direction they need to go. But
yeah, right. Redirected to another set of boats, another set of ducks, right?
Correct. Whether that's the same organization or a different organization, right? And if it's the same organization, then I do have radio communications. Like I do have methods to make sure the ducks are on track. I'm probably not watching them once they leave the horizon, but I'm probably staying in contact and getting feedback, right? But what is the end game? Because we kind of led this whole conversation. Kind of started from a premise that you had that we haven't really touched on. So what is the premise, and what do we need to touch on here, Paul?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. What was it? Does anybody remember the premise?
With your question around happiness, I have enough.
Oh, right.
We're killing Carlos. We're killing him, Paul. Killing him.
Yeah. So Paul, I
I
think
thought
that
Carlos was going to make the transition.
Wait,
I
he
did
said
the transition a
twice
long time
again because
ago.
I think you forgot what your premise was. Like even I tried steering it towards the happiness question.
Oh, no. We're lost.
You're still on vacation mode. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me restrain it in a different way. You guys talk about all this work and where you take it and you put the people for the plan, but when do you know that you had enough and that you're happy with the direction that it's taking, so you can say, you know, I think that is going the way that my vision was going. Now I am happy, so I can focus on the next step.
Okay. So it all matches. It all matches. I am frequently reviewed as someone who is consistently happy. They wonder why, but also consistently less concerned about the success of something I put in motion. So, to the premise, I do spend a good portion of my time winding up ducks, putting them in the ground and letting them go. The reason why I can maintain happiness is because I don't spend a good portion of my time thinking about the success of each of the ducks, unless it's short term, right? There's this duck, I know it's only a month long, and this success of my quarter is based on the success of this duck getting to that location. However, as CIOs, as technology executives in general, most of the things you do are longer than a month and a quarter. They just go, right? And you have an expectation that there are other people in your organization or other organizations that are actually worrying about the waypoints of this individual duck. So I'm happy because I don't really spend a good portion of my time once I've wound it up and let it go. I spend much more of my time next ducks learning the best way to wind it, the place that I think it'll be more successful, into the next duck. I'm happy because I'm not worried about the experience gains of where that duck's going to go. I have enough experience on those waypoints. I have enough experience in what ducks make sense in the circumstance that I'm in. I have enough stagecraft to be able to talk about those ducks. I have enough conversations like this to ensure that we can entertain and educate others on the ducks that are necessary to do that. I don't have the stress of ensuring it gets to the end. Why? Because 5 and 10 years is a long time. And a lot of external factors like wind and earthquakes and multi-generational changes affect the direction and velocity and acceleration of those ducks anyway. So I'm happy because I spend my time differently. Howard, does that resonate, or do you disagree completely?
I don't disagree completely.
But
I try to focus as close as I get to tactical success. I really try to restrain to growth, right? Because otherwise, I'm with you. Like I don't really get stressed about the tactical. I don't really get stressed about the near term, professionally for sure. Like I get bothered, but it's not really the same. Like I don't carry it with me. It's not really the same thing, right? And most of the bother is there's a limited is around time, right? There's a limited amount of hours in the day. Can I spend those hours in the way that are the most productive, that are the most valuable, that are the most useful, or that are the most relaxing, which is in and of itself useful, right? And so I tend to get frustrated or upset in the near term by those things that waste my time. And I tend to look for near-term opportunities for growth. Growth for me is generally learning something new. I love to learn
knowledge.
Knowledge tends to be the growth that I'm looking for. right? Knowledge in an infinite number of places. And so when you kind of laid this whole thing out, it is never enough, because that I don't ever have enough knowledge. The rest of the stuff it's fine. But the knowledge, I don't really have enough. And then, yeah, it's all about that macro view, right? Can I put the things in motion now that pay dividends in 6 months, in 8 months, in 12 months, in 24 months, in 36 months? And can my vision carry the future to 5 years? Even if that means I have to adjust and change for the duration of being here, but so that when I leave someone with the plans necessary to be successful for those, 24 months after I leave, 36 months, whatever it is after I leave. That's kind of important to me, right? It's never truly as successful as I want it to be, right? Which partially comes from whoever leaves, they get the blame for all the things that the people who are still there do wrong. Right. You know what I mean? No, this went wrong because it was his fault. Because he left, it's easy to blame him, right? So it's very hard, but you kind of have to leave with the confidence that you did the right thing and that you set people up for success and you design the team for success, and kind of et cetera, and then just let it go.
In terms of knowledge, do you think there's ever a topic to which you'll have enough knowledge?
So that depends on the way you would define it enough. Like, there are plenty of topics to which I don't see myself gaining any more knowledge because I'm not interested in the topic.
Okay.
I don't know that was necessarily your question. Right?
Of the topics that you're keenly interested in,
no.
Is there a bottom to that well?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Not in any way. That's the distinct difference between us, I think. You would enjoy your location behind you, right? You'd go into that library, and if that library was entirely about an interesting topic, you would consume as much as you could there. What I would do in that library is I would go in there, I would appreciate the history of that library. They would tell me stories about Howard and his days of reading books in that library. Then I had to walk away, and I'd be satisfied with that knowledge, and I'd walk into another library. I'd walk into another building. I'd walk into another scenario, because the quantity's more interesting than the depth, I guess.
The breadth is more interesting than the depth.
Yeah.
I'm not turned off by breadth. That's right. Because there's a level of education within breadth that I also find fascinating. Right? I often talk about the connective tissue of things, and I'm fascinated by connective tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think history would be an infinitely more useful experience for students if we stopped talking about static dates and instead talked about the connective tissue. Right. The Civil War happening, spurring the Industrial Revolution, and those two things being so close together that one enabled the other and really promoted the other. Right? Like, this country being the US, could not have been successful if our Civil War had happened 50 years earlier. The Industrial Revolution was too far away. The dynamics of labor changing so much would have likely put us out of business. It's also why the North wasn't interested 50 years before. Right? But the Industrial Revolution being there and the dynamics around labor changing pushed us into heavy industrialization in a way we wouldn't have otherwise had patience for. And that connective tissue I find extremely interesting. Right. And I think if we, so that's a breadth conversation, not a depth conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find a lot of value in those, but I have to be able to find that connective tissue.
Right.
And I'm also,
and it may take depth to do that.
Correct. Because you have to study enough facets of places and times to be able to start to see those connections and start to put those connections together. Right. And technology is no different. Right. The connective tissue in technology is insane. I was talking to a company today that's a security company, and they kind of go through their whole spiel. And I went, okay, so you have one of two things that get seen. The first is, wow, this is great. You do a lot of things. It's a very thorough solution to the problem. The other one is, wow, you do a lot of things. It seems like you shotgun. I don't know how you could be good at any one of them because you do so many.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I said, and I think the problem is actually the way you tell the story. Like I had to wait all the way to the end for you to tell the story that actually mattered, which was we've been around a long time, and our philosophy is when chasing the new shiny, you tend to discard all of the lessons that were learned previously. And some
Right.
of those things were really good and really efficient at dealing with specific tasks. And so we don't throw the old away and embrace the new. We use the existing lessons for what they're really good at, and we apply the new to the things the existing isn't good at. And once we've learned the what is currently new well enough that we can establish patterns and lower the barrier for solving those challenges by using simpler methods, we'll use simpler methods to solve those challenges too. And it creates a much more complete ecosystem with the best of both worlds, or best of all worlds. Um, and like it always boggles my mind how much of what we do is technology for technology's sake, right? Or strategy for strategy's sake. You know, what's your cloud strategy? What's your DevOps strategy? What's your insert name of strategy here? All of those are designed to deliver a panicked response that triggers a buying decision that turns into shelfware, abandonware, or crapware, right? And yet we seem like we're really kind of focused on that without even an approach around what's good enough to get the job done, because I don't really understand the job today. Right? I'm just
Right.
moving from crisis to crisis to crisis. And I think why we're happy and why we focus on the things we do is because we don't move from crisis to crisis to crisis, right? When we're stopped in our tracks, we try to understand, what is it that I'm actually trying to solve? What's the truth behind the BS? What's the cause of it? And then how do I solve it efficiently, effectively, utilizing the resources I have available to me? And if I don't have the resources, I don't get wrapped around the axle about it. I just kind of go, okay, cool, then I need the resources, right? It's why
Mm-hmm.
you approach things like ecosystems of talent with so little ego, right? You bring
Right.
that up to most C-level executives and they go, no, 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 we'll do it ourselves. Why? Well, because it's power. Because I get to hire 7 new people to do that. Okay, but that's a silly way to do that. How about
Right.
power comes from being really good at your job,
Right.
right? How about if power came from just being really efficient and really effective? And hey,
Right.
guess what? How about you recognize that it's within you and not your organization? And if they don't appreciate it, just pick a new organization.
Right. So my original premise, I'm happy because I'm satisfied with what I have and what I know. Is that true for you, that statement?
No, I'm happy because I know who I am and I'm happy with who I am. And I get to do the things that make me who I am. And I
And
think
Carlos, why are
that's
you happy?
because he gets to do this podcast with us.
No, because I get to do it. But you just hit the nail on the head. When you learn to be happy with who you are, I think that empowers you to actually develop whatever it is that is your superpower. You can be really good at technology, or you can be really good at being a leader or being a manager. But if you're not happy with who you are, you're going to be trying to copy someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And when you copy someone else, you're going to spend all your effort in trying to copy that person. And then you're going to be really crappy at what you're good because you have no energy left.
Yeah.
But when you actually do a podcast and then you don't mess up the entrance, then you actually could do something really good like this. You see, we end up with a great podcast without no errors because we focus on
Sometimes
doing
you
the
have to
right.
be humbled.
No, but I think that you guys hit it on the nail on the head. You guys have great leadership expertise, looking at it from 2 different angles. Like you said, how I like to go deep, and when he said, "What is the thing that he will never get tired or go deeper?" I'm like, D&D. Like, I'm like, can
Urban.
Paul sit down on a D&D conference and go for
Yeah.
hours talking or playing about D&D. I'm like,
I
I
cannot.
don't think so.
I could
But
go to
that
multiple 45-minute sessions, but I couldn't sit for 8 hours in one topic. That's for sure.
but I think that's a key. When
Yeah.
each one of us learn to be happy, then we can actually have enough and help others. Because that's what you guys do. You said you wind the dogs so they can move forward and they can actually fulfill what they're good at.
True.
Well, my friends, it's been awesome to see you again. And each one of you that are watching our episode, I know that you're watching because I can see the views. Make sure that you share, you subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.